Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at one of the two graded stakes events on Saturday at Saratoga. Race 9, the race right before the featured Jim Dandy, is the Grade 3 Lake George. This one going the mile and the 16th distance on the inner turf course for the 3-year-old fillies. And as we throw up the field for this race, 10 fillies entered for the turf. There is one MTO in the field. That's the number 11 K Cup. She would be a heavy favorite if this race came off the turf, but we hope that's not going to happen, and the weather forecast looks pretty good right now. And Mike, pretty clear that the major players in this race are those exiting the Wild Applause from earlier this month, the race that earned a pretty big buyer speed figure. And if those fillies run as well in this spot, they're going to take some beating.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel like if those three horses show up here, somebody's going to have to up their game to come out on top in this race. I think there are some interesting horses at prices in here, David, but they've got their work cut out for them against three horses just ran really well up here.
Yeah, and those three horses we're referencing are the three shortest prices on the morning line for those entered for turf: Classic Q, Lavender Disaster, and Play with Fire. In Classic Q, she was the winner of the Wild Applause, and we'll take a look at the pace projector of this race. And Mike, I was reading the post-race quotes from the Wild Applause, and trainer Mark Cassie was saying that he didn't realize how much of a lone speed Classic Q looked on paper until he watched our video, and we convinced him that he probably should go to the front with her. And I don't think he really drew it up on paper for her to go 46 and change to the half mile, but she got a little pressure that day, still won, but did so in gate to wire fashion. I'll be interested to see if she gets as much pressure up front in this race, but once again, she looks like she could have a clear early lead if she wants it.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they tried to change anything too much with her here, just because the Wild Applause notwithstanding. I mean, even her other, at least in my opinion, her other good races are just races where she's right up close to the pace. I just feel like she's kind of a free running kind of a horse. And we'll just see what kind of trip she can get here. Maybe she'll get loose on the lead again. We'll talk more about the Wild Applause when we get to her. I'm not sure that I'm, totally sold on her off of that race, although she did run well that day.
I'll be interested to see if the number 10 Play with Fire is as close to the pace as she's shown here. If she is, she could have a wide trip coming to her, but I'd imagine from the post, they could take her a little bit further back in this spot. Let's go through this field from the rail out, beginning with the number 1 Raining Flowers, a horse coming off a third place finish in the Penn Oaks last time, but that was a pretty short field for that race, and she was no match for the winner, Laurelin, a horse that she's been beaten by twice in her last 3 starts. I'm like, this is a filly that showed some talent during her 2-year-old season. She was a closing third in the PG Johnson up here last summer, a race that didn't feature a whole lot of pace, so she ran well there. I just haven't really seen the progression since then.
Yeah, me either. That's the real issue with her. I feel like she was kind of underrated too as a 2-year-old, even though there were no fast races on her car. That final start there, the Tepin, where Laurelin beat her for the first time, she didn't get exactly a great trip in that race. And I actually felt like she ran really well there. Off the layoff, she got rained off to the dirt. I don't think you're supposed to hold that race against her. In the Penn Oaks last time, a short field, she just sort of sat inside and never really made a serious run in there against Laurelin. Again, she's got to find a way to step forward, David. But I actually think she's pretty good, and she'll be a pretty big price in this race. I can see trying to get her in there somewhere.
The number 2 is Pretty Lavish, a horse who finished second to Play with Fire. We'll get to a little bit too back at Pimlico, but last time out, they took her to Monmouth Park for the Boiling Springs. We'll take a look at the replay of the stretch run of this race. And Mike, this was a softer spot than she's going to find herself in on Saturday. I thought she got a pretty good trip overall. She saved ground early. Paco Lopez typically delivers a good turf ride at Monmouth, and he tipped her out with plenty of time in the middle of the stretch and just couldn't really get there. Actually got passed in the late stages. So she's going to have to do better against this field.
Yeah, agreed. I feel similarly about her last 2 starts, David. I mean, I just feel like she got really good trips in both of those races and just wasn't good enough to get the job done either time. Not that she ran poorly, but she wasn't good enough. This race is tougher than either of those two. She's going to have to do better.
Number 3, Daisy Flyer, is an interesting horse coming back off a layoff in here, Mike, because I won't say that I loved any of her 2-year-old races last year, that I do think she was better than that head margin would suggest. When she broke her maiden at Kentucky Downs last year, she was pretty wide that day and made a nice move to take over before it got close at the end. The Miss Griot, she was a huge price. That's a race I was just willing to draw a line through. She wasn't really ridden that aggressively in that spot. And she came off a layoff back in March in the Here Comes the Bride. Let's take a look at the replay of the stretch run of that race. And she got a good trip in the sense that she saved ground most of the way, but it's not like this race was totally falling apart at the end. And she's really finishing in the final eighth of a mile, kind of diving between horses right at the end. And you'll see that horse in the pink silks right inside of her. That's actually Classic Q, who's the morning line favorite in this race. And we're going to take a look at her in just a little bit. it. But I mean, it gets pretty close at the end here, Mike, for a horse that was 87-1, only missing by a neck. Now, she's gone to the sidelines since then and is coming back off a layoff here. But I find it interesting that she's running in another graded stakes rather than trying in an allowance race.
One of the more interesting long shots in this race, I think. We'll see how much better she can do. Yeah, that was clearly a step forward in her 3-year-old debut last time. David, the Here Comes the Bride to me is a race that I've struggled with ever since they ran it. I didn't like it at the time. I feel like maybe I was wrong about it, so I'm willing to reevaluate it, but I'm still not thrilled with that race overall. And I understand that Classic Q's run well out of that race several times. And I've heard people making excuses for Classic Q in that race. And I just didn't think that she had one. I don't know, man. I don't like that race. But I also at the same time don't want to knock this horse too much, because within the context of things, she ran well in there, and she's going to be a price in here.
I just know we can see these turf horses improve so much from their 2-year-old to 3-year-old seats. And I think we caught her right in the midst of some improvement over the winter. We'll see if she can take another step forward now. The number 4, Lavender Disaster. She was third in the Wild Applause, the key race that we were referencing earlier that horses are coming out of. Mike, you could make the case that she got the toughest trip of the 3 fillies that finished in the trifecta there, because they used her pretty aggressively to at least try to make Classic Q work a little bit on the front end, then backed off and tried to come again, and she flattened out at the end. But I think she's a better horse when she gets held up and produces one finish.
I agree with that. It'll be interesting to see how they play it here. I think they will probably take a hold of her this time and try to get her covered up a little bit. I also, when I watched the Wild Applause too, David, I'm not sure what the plan was there. I feel like the more I look at that race, though, I feel like Chad and Irad's plan there was to make the lead. And once they couldn't make the lead, then they just had to sort of take a seat in there. And I'm not sure that actually worked that well for them. She did try to take a second run at the winner there. It just was no match. But I didn't think she ran poorly at all there. And I think she's going to get a different trip this time. I still have some pretty high hopes for this film. I think she's really good. And I think she's going to win some big races down the line.
Well, maybe Chad thought he could make the lead because Mark Cassey told our colleague Mike Welsh in the pre-race advance that he was going to rate Classic Q. It didn't play out that way. I think we changed his mind. But Classic Q, the number 5, she was the winner of the Wild Applause. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race. And, Mike, the key part that we were talking about earlier was actually the beginning of the race, where she had to work to make the front end. I mean, she always breaks well, and it became clear as soon as the gates opened, the Classic Q was going forward. But Lavender Disaster actually pushed her through the opening quarter mile before backing off. And it forced Classic Q to lay down some legitimate fractions, and at least she showed that this time she could finish after setting a legitimate pace early, because in the Regret 2 back, she kind of ran off on the front end and then had nothing left for the stretch drive. Now, maybe the turn back to a mile helped her a little bit. I also think, Mike, the rails being set back to 0 feet on that July 4th weekend really helped horses that were able to save ground every step of the way. But let's note, the rails are going to be set at 0 feet again this week.
Yeah, all those things are true. I'm just going to refrain from knocking this horse too much. And I understand that when you watch that full replay, and yes, Lavender Disaster briefly looked like she wanted the lead there and sort of pushed Classic Q into the first turn there. But after that, David, I know the fractions look fast to me. That race, the pace, the fractions might have been fast, but they weren't hard. And this horse got absolutely loose on the lead up the backstretch. And when they came for at the top of the stretch, she still had plenty left in there. I'm not knocking her, but I think she had another perfect trip last time. And to me, the only times when Classic Q runs well is when she gets a perfect trip. And when she doesn't, I just don't think she's that good. If she's going to be the favorite this time again, I'm betting somebody else.
I'll be interested to see if anybody else takes their horse out of their best game to press her in here, because last time it was Lavender Disaster. I don't think they're going to do that again. Nobody else in here is the obvious pace presser, so we'll see if anybody else tries to go after Classic Q. The number 6, Princess Attitude. Mike, maybe she's the one candidate that could be somewhat forward in this race outside of Classic Q, because she's got a little bit of tactical speed. I don't think she's nearly as naturally fast as Classic Q is, but she can race up close and still stay on at the end. She's actually a horse that could, given her pedigree, I would love to see actually go longer distances than this down the line, but she's getting out to the mile in the 16th here, and she's going to have to run faster to win the race, but she's one I could at least consider to pick up a piece.
Me too. I'm going to use this horse somewhere and just see if she can take one more step forward. I thought she was progressing pretty nicely up to the maiden win at Keeneland. The Hilltop, I didn't think she ran great in the Hilltop, but it's at least worth pointing out that that turf course wasn't good. It was something much softer than that, and maybe she just didn't really like it that much. I thought she kind of got back on track last time. She was only second best in that race, but I thought she ran fine in there. And I feel like there could be another forward move for her. She's going to be a price in this race. I'm using this horse.
The number 7, Pookie, is relatively lightly raised. She's making just the second start of her 3-year-old campaign. And Mike, I don't think this was the first choice for her connections because it feels like she's been entered just about every week and rained off every
Yeah.
time since that last race. So this is probably plan C or plan D for her connections. But she is a horse that has shown some talent at points. She broke her maiden in her second career start during her 2-year-old season. Was no match for Stakes Company in the Tepin, but we haven't seen a whole lot of her yet during her 3-year-old season. So there is the possibility she's improved.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a fan of hers. I remember thinking too that even though she wasn't competitive in the Tepin last year, I remember thinking she didn't have much of a chance in that race. I didn't like the trip or the ride that she got in there, and maybe she didn't run as poorly as it looks. Off the layoff there, she was just no match for Lavender Disaster. But it was her first start back, and maybe she needed it, and now she can move forward with that race under her belt.
The number 8, Terradora, is a late runner in this race. She's picked up 4th place in the Edgewood and the Regret at Churchill Downs in her last couple of starts, beaten by some very good horses, Nitrogen and Fion, who just photoed for the victory in the Grade 1 Belmont Oaks earlier this month. So she was facing good horses in there and arguably is getting slight class relief here, Mike, but she had a pretty honest pace to close into in the Regret last time and still couldn't do a whole lot with it. Fion closed much better than she did in that race, and I just feel like there's limited upside with this filly at this point.
Yeah, me too. I mean, she had the allowance race at Keeneland 3 back where she finished second. I mean, there was a huge pace in that race that she came running into, and I don't think she's run particularly well in either of her stake starts since then.
The number 9, Good Long Cry. She's another potential candidate to go forward in this race
Yeah.
because she did run some of her best races during her 2-year-old season when she showed speed and drawn outside. Maybe the game plan under Luis Saez will be to try to go forward to at least save a little ground into that clubhouse turn. The problem with her, Mike, is that her form just has not really maintained at a high level going into her 3-year-old season. Now, she's probably been on the wrong surfaces the last couple of times, but even her races 3 and 4 back leave a little something to be desired. I know she got some wide trips. I was just still hoping to see her finish better in those spots.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I just don't like any of her races enough to want to, sit here and make excuses for her, even at a big price. You mentioned on the wrong surface the last two. The race 3 back, they ran her against the boys for some reason. I'm not sure why they did that. So if you wanted to dress her up, I guess you could, but I just don't like her races enough to want to do that.
And then on the outside is the number 10, Play with Fire, the final filly in the field entered for the turf. Mike, she was visually impressive winning that Hilltop 2 back, as you mentioned, over a course labeled good, probably closer to yielding, and it seemed like she really appreciated the ground at Pimlico that day. She was the runner-up in the Wild Applause that we discussed and took a look at earlier, behind Classic Q. And boy, Mike, coming off the far turn, it looked like she had dead aim at Classic Q, given the trip that she had worked out. She had sat off that early duel, gradually worked her way forward while riding the rail, tipped out at the top of the stretch, and it looked like Flavien Prat had played it perfectly, but she just could never get by Classic Q in the late stages. So I hold that against her a little bit. Maybe she's more comfortable coming from a little further back than she was in that last race, but now she's drawn outside and has to find a way to save ground.
Yeah, I don't like the post for her here. Well, see, she did ultimately, I would just say if you just watch that race, she was in a perfect spot all the way around the track there in the Wild Applause. But again, I guess I look at that race a little bit differently. I didn't think it was like some kind of, monstrous setup for her in there. I just felt like Classic Q got away with a little bit of murder there on the front end. I thought this really ran fine in that race. I really liked her Hilltop 2 starts back against weaker horses, yes, but I thought she ran really well in there too. She's good. If she gets the right trip in here, I think she can win. I'll just wait and see what kind of price she is.
Let's go to picks for this Lake George. And Mike, you've made it pretty clear you're not the biggest fan of the number 5 Classic Q, who probably will go favorite in this race once again. You did include her third in your picks, but
Yeah.
you prefer the other two, I think, coming out of that Wild Applause.
Yeah, I'm just trying to beat her again in here. And listen, I'm willing to be wrong about it. But if she gets, maybe she will prove me wrong, get to the lead here and just turn out to be really good. But I'm just not sold on her. I hope she's the favorite. I want to bet Lavender Disaster in here.
I do think Classic Q is the horse to beat once again. I'm just intrigued by the number 3 Daisy Flyer, who showed so much progression when she made that brief appearance over the winter, and now coming back off another layoff. Rusty Arnold can have some horses ready to run in big spots at prices over the years, and this is a horse that does have a pedigree to improve later in her career, so we'll see if she can take another step forward. 3-5-4-6 for me, and 4-10-5-6 for Mike in race 9 at Saratoga on Saturday, the Grade 3 Lake George. Good luck if you're playing the races later this week.